Joining us now as he does Tuesdays from the Province and Post Media, Mr. Patrick Johnston. How we doing, Peach?
Oh, I'm pretty good. You know, it's a brisk morning.
You didn't lose 6-1.
No, I did not lose 6-1.
No. Hey, before we get into all the ins and outs of all this, should Canucks fans care right now? Like, that's what I'm having trouble with. Like, they did what so many of us want them to do. They're losing so that they sink farther and farther, and yet you can't help but just sort of react and be like, wow, there's some really bad players on this team, and those bad players will be back.
Yeah. I go more in a totally other direction, which is that, like, the fact that they're even in this spot, you know, as I've said time and again, like when they signed Kuzmenko, like that was a, you know, that should be a fun, exciting story, and yet it gets all caught up in the reality of the big picture, which is like, this is not a signing you should be making, which like shouldn't even be a thing. You know, cheering against your team shouldn't even be a thing, but that's kind of all Canucks fans have been left with because everything has been so bad. You know, it's the bottoming out thing. How can this get any worse? And yet every day it does. So I don't know. I don't know if there's even an answer to that. I think it's a good question, but I don't know. I should they care? I mean, they want to see a team become good. You know, that's the task. And, you know, if you're looking for the sort of, you know, the relative win, if you will, yeah, sure. But it's just so miserable. I don't blame them if they don't.
Well, then let's ask you the Bodog poll question. Was that the low point for the next season?
We were joking about this before, and I still couldn't find it. I know I tweeted it at some point. How can things get any worse? But knowing, of course, that things are always going to get worse. Yes, sure, for now. I don't know. I mean, at least, you know, in the end, like the previous point, you know, at least they have made a trade. They did trade Bo Horvat, which is something they had to do. You know, so there is, in that twisted sense of things, forward progress towards that goal, I suppose. That was ugly though last night, and you know, coming on the heels of a pretty ugly performance in Detroit. You know, just this. The back-to-back aspect of it all, the sort of the reality of the fact that here's another coach discovering that the team just isn't good enough. You know, no matter what Tocchet may want to say, we're going to have a hard practice today. Great, fine, you know, go for it. The idea that, oh, we're not fit enough. Well, I mean, you know, they actually score more goals at the end of the game than they do at the beginning of the game. The problem has been starts, and the problem's been penalty killing, and then last night, I mean, you know, the air is so totally out of the balloon. You know, what was that goal? I think Jeff highlighted it. That I can't remember which goal it was. It was a 3-on-0 basically, because as he said, they held the entire defense out of the lineup for trade reasons, right? Like, it's just, I can't believe we still have 25 plus. I get lost track. How many games are left to go?
Too many.
Too many. So, yeah, I mean, sure, it's the bottom for this point, but it's only going to get worse.
First game back off a road trip, you'd cut them a little leniency. That tends to be a tough game. That tends to be a game where it's hard to win. Sleep Doctor taught us that a decade ago.
But it's the same team coming from the same place. It's Detroit. They followed you.
Yeah.
I mean, Detroit's body clocks weren't the same, but okay, yes, fine. And it was just the ease at which the Red Wings, like this is a sub-playoff bar team in the East, toyed with you, threw the puck around like it was some sort of practice.
Yeah.
And scored at ease that I think was troubling, particularly to the paying public. And Patrick, that's the other thing. Look, Monday night in February, when there's a wind warning and all that, okay, it's a tougher sell, but building didn't look very full last night.
No, and that's the reality. You say paying public, and we're like, I guess, but you know, there are ticket sales left, right, and center now. You know, they're doing everything they can just to get bums in the seats. And I you know, early in the year, most nights those suites were not full. There were not every suite was sold. You could tell. They've definitely, you know, whether those seats are now being sold or they're getting sort of creative with how they turn the lights on and things like that, so that we don't notice. You just know the everything about the team on the sort of on the revenue side is soft. You know, they have new jerseys. I see a lot of those jerseys around town, so I think they're doing all right with that standpoint. And you know, I said a few weeks ago, you know, hey, they're not making any money, and I was chastised a little bit by someone who would know, saying, they still make money. That's part of the point here. Is that the reason why none of these things happen, is that the bottom line has been kept low enough that they still make money. They're not making as much money as they used to, but there is enough there, and it's just But you just look at everything around it. Like people are talking about the mice now. There's mice all over the building apparently. There's just all kinds of. It's an old building. The sort of the entertainment value on the ice isn't great, and then there's the rest, and it's just I think they're still managing to find people to sell stuff to, and people are still coming to the games, but it's not like it used to be, and I just don't know. I'm not a businessman. Listen, I don't argue about I don't claim to be, but I just look at sort of the way you're just trying to squeeze every last drop out of this spent out orange, and I just wonder at some point the orange has nothing left.
Unless you're an exterminator, mice are rarely good for business, is my understanding. Yeah,
no, it's just
they generally only bring disrepute. That's what I have found.
But are they blind mice?
Well, God willing, otherwise they'd have to look at some bad hockey.
Blindness seems to be an affliction in that building.
Oliver Ekman-Larsson is not a particularly good defenseman.
Not anymore. No.
What? And this is the 32nd time we've asked you this question. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Because this is not 1 year left. If it's 1 year left, we kind of make jokes about it, and we just say whatever. You buy it out, you swallow the pill. There's a bunch of, but there's years left on this deal. What do they do?
Well, I was sort of said last night, you could try the Bolin move, but of course he's got a no move, so you can't even waive him. You can't send him to the minors. Unless he agrees to it, and why would he agree to that?
Right.
You could buy him out, which this is the way the contract is set up. This is sort of one of the windows you're going to do it. It'll be painful for a couple seasons there. As I've said so often, I mean, all this team has done is lived with dead money on the books, and the last thing you want is to go back to that. But maybe there's just no choice. Or you just make him the 23rd guy on the roster, and you do sort of the minimum service that is required to a player on the pro roster, and you just basically, you essentially do the Louis Eriksson thing that they kind of have tried to do in the bubbles or in the 2021 in the COVID season, where basically he didn't play. I mean, Louis played 6 games or something.
Yeah,
the last game he played, he never played after they had COVID. Partly because if I remember correctly, Louis was the last guy to come out of quarantine, but not because he was sick. I heard it was something like he was staying with Edler, and Edler's kid tested positive, and so Louis was an exposure, and the rules were really tough.
Yeah,
we may forget, but Louis didn't play after March, whatever.
And it's one thing to accept your lot in life for a year or even 2. But if they put him on effectively like it's a new version of Robidaw Island, you're on the active roster, but not play. If you're saying OEL, there's 4 years of this.
Yes.
You do wonder if a guy does give up eventually.
Yeah, and in the end, you just sort of say, hey, can we just trade you back to Arizona or wherever, and you just do whatever. Or, if you'll just let us send you somewhere else, you can. If you really want to keep playing, you can do it somewhere else, but it's not going to be here. I mean, that's sort of it's extreme and it's tough, and I feel bad for the guy. It's not his fault that his body's broken down on him, but this is, in the end, this, as they all say, hockey's a business. This is how it goes.
Well, and in the cap world, right? This isn't a worry in the non-cap world. You spend on top of it, but he's a vital piece of space in the cap world. That's why this happens.
Well, and Blake, the item we did in hashtags today from our friend Hart Levine of Puckpedia, in the last 4 years, trade retentions of more than one season, where you're holding on money for more than one season, there's been 7. Ekman-Larsson with 6 years remaining is the most by a mile.
Yeah.
Milan Lucic is next at 4. Goaltending. They put Martin on waivers. We think Demko's ready. How do you see goaltending playing out here in the short term?
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of answers it right there. It's been a tough go for Spencer Martin, as I tweeted. He is one of the kindest, sort of most friendliest people I've encountered, in the room. And a guy who, I mean, the Clarkey rules, goalies don't talk on game days, and the number of times his eyes have sort of darted over as I'm in conversation with someone near him, and him saying something quietly to contribute to the conversation. He worked hard. He rebuilt his game. He had a really good season last year. Did everything he needed, earned that contract. And then, the pressure, I don't know if the pressure, I mean, he's just not good enough to be number one. But like I said, it's a business, and, he'll, I guess, go back to Abbotsford. And, this was something when they signed Delia in the first place, I even wrote about it, is Spencer Martin's job actually that secure? And certainly it was to start with. They had to sort of rebuild Delia to a degree, and Delia hasn't exactly, set the world alight as the other guy. But, I think as a confidence measure, sending him back to Abbotsford, obviously Artur Silovs has been kind of the guy there, but Martin's going to play a bunch. And so, that I'm sure will help him. And yeah, Demko, I mean, it's perhaps a week later than maybe we had originally expected, but because of the challenges of practices and all that kind of thing, I guess it makes sense that he's not getting back. Yeah. So whether he plays tomorrow night, or we wait till the weekend, certainly pretty clear he's going to be in the lineup sometime this week.
Fitness and the new sheriff in town, Rick Tocchet. How do you see this going? Because it's rather old school. We don't get a whole lot of this anymore.
Yeah, I mean, every coach comes in. I mean, literally every coach comes in and says they're not fit enough, right? Like, it's an old thing. It's not fit enough in the way they want. But like I noted, listen, I could buy that if they weren't scoring more goals they've scored the fourth most goals in the third period. Now, some of that's because they've chased so many games, sure, but like the fact they're able to execute when they should be more tired than they are in the beginning of the game, to me, puts that idea a little bit to the side. I mean, listen. Rick Tocchet's the new coach. He's going to come in. He's going to see if he can he's going to see if he can fix what he thinks is wrong. So yeah, I mean, getting frustrated with the sort of attitude, the element of what the team is. I mean, a lot of this too is about him trying to set up next year at this point. He knows that. He's talked pretty openly about the task at hand. He knows that they're not here to make the playoffs. He's here to create some identity, create a team that he thinks is going to, set a bar, set a standard that he thinks will matter next year. And that's what it's about, so at a certain level, go for it. This is what he's about, and this is a chance for him to establish that.
It's great seeing you Sunday at Goodco for our Super Bowl party with the gang from Bodog. Appreciate your attendance.
Yeah, it was good fun. It was a neat, I mean, I can't remember. We were trying to debate, those of us that were there, because of course we don't go down to Granville anymore, but thinking about where trying to imagine what was this place. But what they've done in there is good. It's cool. And having that sort of upper area, which, you could book out for your own purposes. I mean, I was not paid for this, but I thought it was great. I think if you're looking for a place to go and you need a little venue space for that kind of an environment, but, lots of TVs and lots of games and, good food. Good place to go.
The former Colony, and before that, Caprice night.
That was the Caprice. Okay, yes. I was never a fan of the Caprice. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm. You're right about the upstairs room, though.
Yeah.
Amazing space. Thank you for this, buddy. Until next week.
Take care, guys.